Like Amerigo Vespucci exploring South America, we're going to do our own little Portuguese expedition, except we're not finding the new world, we're finding something better. We're finding the world of cells, specifically human cells. Cells come in large inseminating numbers and come in all shapes and sizes. Cells create organs, which create organ systems, which in turn, as a whole, create organisms. Cells are usually locked to specific classes, but they are usually overpowered. Cells are specially equipped for their role, but have maxed out stats for whatever job they are required to do. There are a lot of overpowered human cells in the current meta, so let's take a look one by one at how broken these human cells are. Stem cells are up first. Stem cells are the body's raw materials from which all other cells that have specialized functions are generated. These seemingly friendly cells are so overpowered it boggles my mind. With very generous frame data, stem cells are able to divide themselves to form more cells called daughter cells. Stem cells are essentially able to shadow clone jutsu themselves with no repercussions. This is currently one of the most safest options in the current cell meta and has no counters. No other cell build currently has the ability to create more cells that can be specialized. Differentiation occurs from specialized cells with a more specific function, such as blood cells, brain cells, heart muscle cells, or bone cells. Stem cells have massive plot armor, and their ability to talk no jutsu themselves out of any situation is unrivaled. One of the most broken things about stem cells is that they can be used to regenerate and repair diseased or damaged tissues in people. This makes stem cells one of the most broken healers in all of video game history. Stem cells have the potential to frame one, generate new tissue for use in transplant and regenerative medicine. I do believe the devs do know how broken stem cells are, so we might see a patch in the next upcoming update. With extreme flexibility and broken mechanics, stem cells are an S tier. Sex cells, also known as gametes, are reproductive cells created in male and female gonads that bring new life into existence. These broken-ass cells have the ability to create new human beings. With a 99 fertilization skill, an egg cell and a sperm cell have the ability to combine. Like Goku and Vegeta fusion hawing together, they create reproductive cells when they make contact. Sex cells are able to dish out as much DPS as a Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Sperm cells and egg cells spawn opposite from each other on the map. Sperm cells will be produced in the men's testicles, while egg cells will be produced in the woman's ovaries. While most cells undergo mitosis to reproduce, sex cells are built different. They undergo meiosis. And if that wasn't broken enough, the genetic material of the original parent cell is divided up twice, not once. I have no fucking idea what the devs were thinking when creating sex cells and making them this fucking broken. Gametes have very little end lag, so it's very difficult to punish them when they whiff their shield. Whatever you do, try not to get hit by an up smash chromosome, because you will instantly get eviscerated. Sex cells are very concerning for the tier list. I put them in S tier. Pancreatic cells contain a bunch of echo fighters within it, as it has both exocrine and endocrine functions. Just like male masculinity, pancreatic islet cell types include alpha cells, beta cells, and delta cells. But while you want to be an alpha male and not a beta or delta male, it doesn't matter for pancreatic cells because all are amazing. Alpha cells are able to produce glucagon within 4 frames, beta cells produce insulin within 6 frames, and delta pancreatic cells are able to produce somatostatin within 3 frames. Because insulin and glucagon are involved in the regulation of glucose metabolism, pancreatic cells tips the tier in its favor. Pancreatic cells are extremely good DPSs because of their ability to produce beta cells in response to high blood glucose levels. Pancreatic cells, A tier. Although they are less specialized than normal cells, cancer cells definitely are one of the most broken cells in all of human history. Nay, the history of every single species that ever existed on Earth. Cancer cells are blessed with ridiculous RNG and brain-boggling, dendrite-destroying, axon terminal eviscerating frame data. Cancer cells are cells that join the dark side, cells that have awakened their renegons and unlock the ability to produce cellular Susanos. Cancer cells are able to ignore signals that normally tell cells to stop dividing by frame 1. This is the reason why cancer has virtually no counterpicks. Cancer cells also have the ability to genjutsu other normal cells, molecules, and blood vessels to provide nutrients in order for tumors to grow. Cancer cells can also hire blood vessels to remove waste products from tumors and pay them minimum wage. Cancer cells are host to many different DLC echo fighters, including carcinoma, leukemia, lymphoma and myeloma, sarcoma, central nervous system build, and mesothelioma. Cancer cells have the most insane plot armor and are one of the most overpowered anime antagonists to ever exist. Cancer cells, S tier. It's boning time. Bone cells are highly underappreciated and one of the dark horses within this human cells tier list. Bone cells has extremely good frame data and excellent DPS to maintain a balance between bone formation and resorption, ultimately to control bone structure and function. Bone cells have the power to control any type of tailed beast. Their resume of control includes recruitment, differentiation, and maturation of osteoclasts. Data crunchers looking at bone cell frame data conclude that they might play a role in regulation of calcium and phosphate metabolism in bone tissue. Osteoclasts are the bone cell builds that resorb or dissolve the bone. Osteoblasts form the bone, which also contain assist trophies called osteocytes that help maintain bone and lining cells that cover the surface of the bone. Because of their cuboidal and columnar shape, osteoblasts have really small hitboxes. This makes it much more harder to be punished, and you can avoid a lot of your enemy's attacks. Bone cells, B tier. Blood cells. These hematopoietic cells are broken as fuck. There are 3 main echo fighters: erythrocytes, red blood cells, leukocytes, white blood cells, and thrombocytes, platelets. These 3 echo fighters add up to a total 45% of the blood tissue by volume, the other 55% composed of plasma. Erythrocytes can carry anyone and anything to victory, as they carry oxygen and collect carbon dioxide through the use of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a broken-ass mechanic of an iron-containing protein that gives red blood cells their color and facilitates transportation of oxygen from the lungs to tissues, and carbon dioxide from tissues to the lungs to be exhaled. Red blood cells don't have a nucleus and are much smaller than most other cells, making its hurt box very small. There are very few options out of shield that can actually damage blood cells. Leukocytes are one of the best defensive builds in all of cell tiers. They not only defend the body against infectious disease, but also against foreign materials. Thrombocytes, or platelets, are very small, irregularly shaped, clear cell fragments, with a small hurt box and extremely good DPS. The average lifespan of a platelet is normally just 5 to 9 days. However, platelets have an extremely overpowered skill, being able to release thread-like fibers to form clots to control bleeding. One of the first ever devs to work on red blood cells was a Dutch naturalist in 1658, Jan Swammerdam, who was the first person to observe red blood cells under a microscope. Blood cells, A tier. Are you a fan of muscles? I wouldn't be so sure. Like the Treaty of Tordesillas, you might just get cucked. Myocytes are broken as they make up muscle tissue. There are 3 muscle cell echo fighters: cardiac, skeletal, and smooth. Many people within the esports human cells arena refer to skeletal myocytes and cardiac myocytes as muscle fibers due to their long and fibrous shape. Muscle cells have extreme agility and have the best movement out of all the cells in this tier list. Cardiac muscle cells probably need a nerf as they contain many mitochondria. Yes, the powerhouses of the cell. Skeletal muscle cells have extremely good DPS as they're cylindrical, striated, multinucleated, and also contain many mitochondria. Smooth muscle cells are spindle-shaped, contain a single central nucleus, and are arranged in sheets. Because of the sheer amount of mitochondria, muscle cells are able to generate a shit ton of ATP. This makes them extremely broken because they're able to do so much shield damage and apply constant pressure. If you thought that was broken, wait till you hear this. The cell membrane of a muscle cell is known as the sarcolemma, and the cytoplasm is called sarcoplasm. This sarcoplasm contains myoglobin, an oxygen storage site, as well as glycogen, in the form of granules in the cystole, which provide an energy supply. The devs must have been smoking crack when they made muscle cells. Muscle cells, A tier. Do you need a little fat in your life? Derived from mesenchymal stem cells, adipocytes, also known as lipocytes or fat cells, are definitely not balanced. These cells compose adipose tissue, specializing in storing energy as fat. There are two main ecophyters of adipose tissue: white adipose tissue and brown adipose tissue, most commonly referred to in the esports cell arena as white fat and brown fat. White fat cells contain a single large lipid droplet surrounded by a layer of cytoplasm. The nucleus here is abnormal as it is flattened and pushed to the periphery. This not only shifts the hurt box, but makes it really hard to do shield damage. White fat cells are able to frame to store fat in a semi-liquid state, composed primarily of triglycerides and cholesterol ester. White fat cells are also able to ejaculate frame to many proteins acting as adipokines, such as resistin, adiponectin, leptin, and apelin. Brown fat cells are a little bit different. They have considerable cytoplasm with several lipid droplets scattered throughout. These cells are massively juiced up with a shit ton of mitochondria. Brown fat, also known as baby fat, is used to generate heat. This makes brown fat cells extremely diverse and pose an extreme threat to the cell meta. Fat cells, A tier. Rut-row, we've arrived to skin cells. These atomic warriors of the integumentary system are nothing to mess with. The skin consists of 3 layers: the epidermis, dermis, and subcutis. The epidermis is the uppermost layer of the skin. It acts as a physical barrier, almost as strong as a Pokemon holding light clay and setting up a reflect or a light screen. This prevents water loss from the body and prevents entry of substances and organisms into the body. This makes skin cells extremely good at adapting to their opponents, downloading them, learning their tendencies, and reacting accordingly. Epidermis contains 3 ecophyters: keratinocytes, which are skin cells, melanocytes, which are pigment-producing cells, and Langerhans cells, the immune cells. Keratinocytes further differentiate into new DLC, the stratum corneum, horny layer, the stratum granulosum, the granular layer, the stratum spinulosum, the spinous, spiny, or prickle cell layer, and stratum basale, the basal layer. Melanocytes are formed in the basal layer in the epidermis, producing melanin, the pigment responsible for different skin color. Langerhans cells are responsible for helping the body learn and later recognize new allergens. Skin cells, B tier. Oh boy, it's time to get nervous because we've arrived at nerve cells. These electrically excitable cells that communicate with other cells via specialized connections called synapses are extremely broken. This is the main component of nervous tissue in all animals. There are 3 main ecophytes of neurons. First are sensory neurons, which respond to stimuli such as touch, sound, or light. Next includes motor neurons, which receive signals from the brain and spinal cord to control everything from muscle contractions to glandular output. Interneurons connect neurons to other neurons. Typically, neurons consist of a cell body, a soma, dendrites, and a single axon, which the soma is usually compact. The dendrites have an extremely large AOE, typically branching profusely and extending a few hundred micrometers from the soma. A hidden skill that the neuron uses is the myelin sheath, which is like applying plot armor to insulate and protect nerves of the brain and spinal cord. The distal part of the axon has extremely good frame data. This axon terminal is largely involved in the release of the neurotransmitter and contains a large amount of mitochondria that produce the energy required to facilitate the process. By sheer number, nerve cells are able to instill fear into all other cells and has dominated the cell meta for quite some time. Nerve cells, S tier. Endothelial cells, the fuckers that are responsible for the cardiovascular system and lymphatic system. Like an anime commander-in-chief, they're able to line all blood vessels and regulate exchange between the bloodstream and the surrounding tissues. Endothelial cells are able to frame to organize the growth and development of connective tissue. Endothelial cells have an extremely good homeostatic mechanism, which is probably maxed out at 99. With this homeostatic skill cape equipped, cells that are short of oxygen increase their concentration of hypoxia-inducible factor 1, which stimulates the production of vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF. Endothelial cells specialize in fluid filtration even better than Brita. These cells don't dilly-dally around and are involved in many aspects of vessel function, including blood clotting, inflammation, formation of new blood vessels, angiogenesis, and constriction and enlargement of the blood vessel called vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Endothelial cells have extremely good plot armor, and if you isekai'd them into a new anime, they would still be overpowered. Endothelial cells, A tier. And that's the overpowered human cells tier list.